It was floating next to an open window, seemingly completely focused on the person on the other side, a person sleeping in a bed, maybe an arm's reach away from the window. The person glowed light green and didn't toss and turn like the Remetz girl had. No, they lay perfectly still. And as I approached even closer, I noticed the dark shape moving ever so slightly. It was breathing, and with every deep and slow breath, a puff of emerald mist would rise from the sleeper and swirl towards the creature, disappearing under its hood. At least I thought it was a hood, atop a long black robe, the body under it completely hidden. I was now floating maybe 2 meters from it, and I realized I was holding my breath. It wasn't a robe. It was wings, their feathers long and pitch black, and it wasn't a hood. That was its head. The feathers shorter and flat, peaked over the forehead. It had eyes too, bulging eyes as big as footballs and blood crimson. It breathed in the emerald mist through a viciously curved beak, making a soft, wheezy sound as it did so. It sounded as if the act was giving it pleasure. "Hey!" I shouted suddenly. "Leave them alone!" It didn't react to me at all. It breathed in again, and its feathers ruffled ever so slightly this time as it took in more than what it had with the previous breath. I said stop! I bellowed, riled by it ignoring me. It moved then, raising a long arm-like appendage and waving me off casually. Years ago, I'd spent a month working as a waiter at a 5-star luxury sea resort. The richest assholes would often dismiss me with the same motion after I'd brought them their champagne and caviar and lobster. A week into the job, I had to teach myself not to grit my teeth for fear of spending all the money I earned on a good private dentist. Fine, I thought. Have it your way. I floated up to it, pushed it hard against what I guessed could be a shoulder. It reacted. Oh boy, did it react. It turned fully towards me, its eyes growing bigger and glowing harder, 2 crimson discs that didn't have pupils but still seemed to bore into me. It spread its long, spindly arms even as it unfolded large wings. Talons gleamed at the end of each elongated finger and toe I saw as I looked down at its bare feet. It had a basic humanoid shape, but its limbs were longer and thinner, and every inch of its body was covered in those pitch-black feathers. It clacked its beak at me. Then it shrieked, and I swear I heard it inside my head. But, while everything from the moment it turned towards me had made me stare in horror, the shriek snapped me out of it and allowed me to react. I punched it squarely in the chest.
We sit across from each other on the kitchen table, with empty shot glasses and a dusty bottle of Vishnevats in front of us. I delight in another cigarette, hoping it would calm my nerves and numb the persistent tinge at the back of my neck since Monica has entered my home. She looks awkward and out of place while we wait for the leftover chushpais to heat up. The pleasant smell of vegetables lingers around us, offering a creeping feeling of nostalgia for a simpler time. You know your grandfather was the Pannonian witch, right? I hope he told you that much, and I hope he warned you I'm nothing like him. Monica considers my words, but then nods. I don't know much about him. I found out about the property during the reading of my father's will. Then I found the letters Yagor sent him hidden in a box underneath the bed. There was a sealed envelope addressed to me in which my grandfather wrote to find you if I needed any help. So I decided to heed his words. Seems like Domagoj never warmed up to his father again. I raised my eyebrow and tapped the cigarette over the ashtray. I didn't even know my grandfather had been alive until we got the information he wasn't. She lifts her shoulders and looks to the side. Have you ever visited that place? I ask, inhaling a large amount of nicotine. No, I only know what the lawyers told me about. There's a small house surrounded by 100 hectares of forests, which is a lot. I nod and close my eyes. Your grandfather got this estate from his teacher. Witches always inherited land from each other because they extorted much of their power from it. Yagor's apprentice should have gotten it, but Yagor never had one. Times changed. Modernity made people strive for flashier careers, and Christianity started preaching about the sinfulness of our practices. The locals lost their interest in us. Monica is right to be careful when she asks, "Us?" I pull in as much smoke as I can, dulling out the world around me. I was an apprentice once, along with your grandfather. We were an anomaly, 2 apprentices by 1 teacher, but we were happy to learn together, to help continue the tradition, you know? But only one of us could be named the Pannonian Witch, and that title went to Jagor. Silence follows my words. The house feels heavy with the night. A slight buzzing comes from the outside, across my garden, and over the overgrown fields that embrace my property. There is a commotion in the forest. Turmoil travels through the air in jittery traces of dread and meaningless hope. Even though Monica has never been to Jagor's home, and even though it's situated far away from us, the old oaks which grow there know his blood has come back.
In the year of 2019, the stars finally aligned for me and my 3 best friends and allowed us to graduate and find jobs. Also, conveniently, New Year's Eve was falling on Tuesday, so, because we all finally had real grown-up money to spend, we had decided to go all out and rent a flat together. While planning, the flat suddenly became a country house, and the short 2-day stay somehow became 5 nights. I blame Anna Maria, really. She was in charge of finding a suitable place for the 4 of us because A. She was the most sensible with money, B. When we were in high school, she knew the most geography out of all of us, and C. She had a family in every single part of Croatia. We had all hoped for some sort of discount on the account of Anna Maria's excessive lineage. After a thorough search, which consisted of meeting up at our place and drinking 4 bottles of wine between the 4 of us, we settled on Lika. It was beautiful, a winter wonderland in its fullest sense, and most importantly, it was cheaper than anything else we'd looked at. Anna Maria came through with her connections in Senj and found us a place in the middle of nowhere. The village we settled on was a short drive from Gospić, but had less than 100 residents, most of them living there only on paper, so the country houses could be built. As Anna Maria described it, only forests, the snow, and uninhabited fields around us. The closest market was almost 10 kilometers away, but we didn't plan on using it. We would pack our own food and drinks, and would not need to venture out for the whole stay. This promise suited my nerves. This was what we wanted, what we needed after the constant stress of everyday life. To be left alone, to not be bothered by the outside world. Our only plan was to sprawl on the couch, drink ungodly amounts of alcohol, and perhaps dip our toes in the indoor pool or jacuzzi. We were not a terribly picky bunch.
14. Hrvay's note in the Notes app on his phone. He frequently used the app to write down ideas for his podcast, things he didn't want to risk forgetting later, impressions, thoughts, details and such, so he could use them for inspiration. Does Croatia have a cursed mountain? Research it. Even if there's no stories about cursed mountains, this trip could make a good case. I know I'm pissed off right now, but this will make a good story once we get back home. Note to all who plan to visit Velebit. Slobodan Relic is a horrible mountain guide. The guy is a scam. Second note to all who want to visit Velebit in search of a hidden treasure, don't. The thing that gets to me most are the fucking clouds. They just manifested out of thin air, literally. They can't just materialize in the middle of a bright sunny day, can they? Research it. Potential cold open of the first episode. Did you know the Velebit is filled with deserted houses, gaping open, empty and dark, covered in plant life, strangling them from the inside out? Needs more brainstorming. The sentence is too wordy and clumsy. Remember that the path is completely overgrown, even more than on the way to the Turkish Dik. Wild fruit trees grow everywhere in thick clusters. I can't recognize plants for shit, but I do trust Silva, at least over our dear guide. And she says we're fighting against dogwood, pomegranate and hawthorn trees, catching at our clothes with their branches. The trees are so dense, I feel like I'm lost in the rainforest. The thorny branches have scratched me all over. I think I look like someone who was beaten with switches all day at a BDSM dungeon. How much until some inhabited place? Who knows? Slobodan says not too long, but Slobodan knows shit about our location. When you get home, open up Google Maps and try to find where we were led to by this idiot. Phone still has no bars. Slobodan has some old school printed map, but he obviously doesn't know how to read it, and neither do any of us, because we're constantly walking in circles, finding the same abandoned ruins of shepherds' huts, hidden under the lichen and thorns. They look unamused, they look angry, they look dead. It's funny how much some miserable, dilapidated huts can radiate with malicious energy. This will be a good story for the podcast, if I ever come back. Lol. At least it hasn't started raining yet. Are Velebit ticks carriers of some weird diseases? Research it. If I die on this mountain because of some stupid tick that latched onto my calf to suck blood, I'm going to return as a ghost and haunt Slobodan for the rest of his loser life. Sooner or later, someone will step on a snake. The grass is simply too tall. Marina mentioned that at least 5 times while we were walking. Nobody wants to think about that. Slobodan is the first in the line, hitting the ground with a stick he found. Marina is not impressed. Neither am I.
Kaya's nerves are getting thinner. Each kilometer feels like a grater inside her head, slowly scraping her brain cells away. By the time they finally arrive at the lodge, she imagines her brain would have turned into a pink sludge and she'd hop out of the car like a dumb, drooling zombie. Tihana, on the other hand, has different concerns. I hope the weather gets better once we're there. It's been freaking pouring since we sat in the car. She whines, rustling through her bag. I bet it's going to be cold up in the hills, right? I should have packed warmer clothes, but it's still October and the heavier jacket is more for November, don't you think? What did you bring, a parka? Very sensible, kudos to you. But well, it's only 3 days, so I guess I'll survive. Damn it, where the hell are my snacks? I swear I brought them with me. Kaya sighs, gripping the steering wheel. 3 days indeed. She's starting to regret offering Tihana the ride. It's been about 2 hours since they left Zagreb, and she's been blabbing away like a wind-up toy. Kaya imagines that's what having a younger sister feels like. Exhausting. You're going to be so late, Tihana laments from the passenger seat, opening a bag of chips. The sound of chewing fills up the car, merging with the thump of rain against the windshield. Take some, she munches, nudging at Kaya with the bag. Outside, the wind howls, making the third tractor they've been stuck behind for the last half an hour slow down even more. A humorless huff escapes Kaya's throat. How could she have forgotten the joys of taking country roads in Zagorje? Oh, come on, Kaya mutters, squinting at the blurry tractor-like shape. Fucking move. Her hand itches to smack the horn. A sudden bump in the road makes the car sway, eliciting a grunt from Kaya and a squeak from Tihana. Kaya's too tired for this. Irritated, she moves to honk the frustration out of her system. Out of all the places, why did Sandra have to pick out Kalnik as their team-building headquarters?
She came to lying down, her butt stuck on the worn-out fabric of a bench too narrow for a grown woman and barely padded enough not to hurt one. At the same time, her head was floating on a celestial cloud. A cloud who was just petting her hair with long, warm fingers. She jumped so hard she had to get caught by the other woman again before she fell on the sticky, narrow patch of floor between the bench and the table. "I'm all right," she growled, and the other woman raised her hands in the air and away from her. Lena managed to find her balance and somehow got to her feet long enough to push herself upwards and onto the opposite bench. She now saw that they were in one of the booths at the far end of the Phantom, the shadowy ones. Sitting up had been a mistake, though, because it provided her with an unobstructed view of the woman she was sharing the booth with. She couldn't help but stare. Strangely enough, the other one didn't seem to mind the attention all that much. "I got you a shot." The other her, for heaven's sake, nodded towards the smallish glass on the table between them, surrounded with several other glasses of the same size but empty. She spoke Croatian, without a hint of Italian in her voice. Well, they had that in common, too. "You need to leave," Lena said, almost rising from her seat, "before we both get fired, or worse." "Not until you hear me out," her double said firmly. "What if somebody sees you? What if my mentor finds out? What if she ends up thinking this is my fault?" Lena hissed. "Everyone here is too high on their victory. No one's going to look at us twice." The woman nudged the glass towards Lena with the knuckles of her fingers. "Šljivovica," was all Lena managed. Yeah, the woman said, sounding unsure for the first time. It was damn weird how familiar the tone was to Lena's ears, and how many memories of the nuns' school, but also the time that predated the nuns, years before she'd learned to keep at least a semblance of control over her voice. Do you like it? Šljivovica. Broken record, scratched from the inside out, like something Anna had listened to too much, something worn thin with age and use. Lena shrugged. Then she grabbed the glass and poured it down her dry, rubbery mouth in one short move. It's about the only thing I can stand, she murmured. Me too, the other woman said, sounding both relieved and intrigued. What about coffee? Can't live without it. The other one's interest was so warm, almost tangible, like an open flame, and twice as luring. Lena tried avoiding her earnest eyes. Couldn't do it. What about men? What about them? I didn't mean any offense, the other Lena said quickly. Good, because I took none. Lena found herself smiling slightly, tried keeping it to herself. Didn't manage. A mirrored smile, just a bit wider, greeted her back.